Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I am delighted to welcome a marketing and a technology expert and author from Milan, Italy, Mr. Chris Peterson. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Chris is the co-founder of Lifemind, and he's an author of a book titled Red and Blue Customers. With over 30 years as a marketing pioneer and entrepreneur, Chris has founded two digital marketing agencies working with both fast growth startups and Fortune 500 companies. And interestingly, he was telling me a few minutes back that his new book, which we will speak about, led to the formation of his business, which is Lifemind. So, Chris, before we get into your book and Lifemind, you've had a fascinating 30-year journey in marketing. What drew you to marketing?
Well, in the beginning, it was the creative aspect, like I think it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then you quickly learn that there's so much more to marketing than just that. Out of school, I worked in publishing and got involved with copywriting in one of my early jobs. And I found that I really enjoyed that, but I also discovered that in spite of all my schooling, I couldn't write very well, because when it comes to copywriting, you have to be so clear and so precise. And it was something that I found fascinating to learn because, normally when you're writing for yourself, you don't have boundaries. And in marketing, you have these tight boundaries.
Correct.
So that was the original draw. And but then I quickly found that there were different aspects of business that were also creative.
Okay. And you founded one of the first digital direct marketing agencies in the 90s, which is probably more before a lot of people even thought of them. What was the industry like back then?
Oh, it was such a wonderful time. At the time that the internet came about in the early to mid 90s, at least for consumer access, um, advertising for me personally was a bit boring. And I felt like we were doing the same thing over and over and over. And so when the internet came around, I quickly recognized it as a potentially strong direct response medium, even though very few people thought about it that way. The early adopters in the marketing world said this is a branding medium. Someone even wrote an article that said no one in their right mind would ever fill out a form on the internet.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, that's crazy, And I'll never forget the day that we got the first person to fill out a form on one of our websites that we hosted on a workstation sitting in our office, which cost us $25,000, which is crazy. Later became a bookend. And so the times were wonderful. We're doing work with Netscape, one of the early pioneers. All website backgrounds were gray. Very few people probably remember that.
Yep.
And we were all trying to figure it out together. And there was so much innovation, similar to now with AI, quite honestly. I see very strong parallels. And so that type of environment just draws me in to experiment and learn. And there are no experts. That's probably the best aspect about it, right? There's no one to tell you exactly how to do it. So you have to figure it out like they do.
Correct. So let's talk a little bit about your book now, Chris. Your book is titled The Red and Blue Customers, and obviously you're American, and therefore red and blue relates to the two political parties in the US. And my first question in this area is, how do red and blue political identities manifest in purchasing habits or brand loyalty?
Yeah, so that was the first big question. I came across some research from Pew Research that expressed the different viewpoints of both sides in a very open way. And this light bulb went off in my head, and I asked myself, I said, well, if these two groups of people see the world so differently, how can this not affect what they buy? Okay, so I dove in and I quickly found a mountain of evidence that liberal customers and conservative customers, because that's what I tend to focus on, not the political parties, not the politics or politicians, but the worldview as liberal or conservative. I quickly found that they largely buy distinct products, consume different media, and align with different brands. And like some quick examples, Harris Interactive, which publishes their poll every year, uh, details the brands that align with one group or the other.
Right.
And in a list of 15, only two or three are on both lists. So, for example, Toyota,
Mm,
Target, Nike, and Honda have more brand trust with liberal customers.
mm,
Home Depot in the United States, General Motors, and USAA, which sells insurance
mm,
to military families, has greater brand trust with conservatives.
mm,
And then there's all this other evidence. Like I'll give you an example, like even watching TV shows. Okay. So the TV shows in the United States, How to Get Away with Murder, Modern Family, Doctor Who, Outlander, Game of Thrones,
mm.
are watched almost exclusively by liberal customers.
Oh,
SEAL Team, Last Man Standing, New Amsterdam, Chicago Fire, and The Good Doctor are
mm,
watched almost exclusively by conservative customers.
mm,
Now, think about someone in advertising planning media and deciding where to invest all their money. If
mm.
they don't know if their customers are more liberal or conservative,
Yeah,
then you could easily buy media that just does not align and you would just be wasting your money. And then
makes.
it goes on to all kinds of things. I mean,
Mm,
cars are an easy example. But there was just a ton of evidence. So I then had to figure out, okay, well, what do you do with that? Like, how do you identify the value sets and worldviews in a way that a business can use?
mm. Amazing. And this is such an amazing insight for me. I mean, I've always known Fox and CNN are on two different sides,
Yes.
but I
Yes.
didn't realize this could go to, a motor car or anything else. Thank you. That's an amazing insight for me. Moving on, Chris, how have you found marketers adapting their strategies to align with these ideological differences?
Well, so here's the interesting thing. Most businesses think
Hmm.
that they are perfectly neutral.
Hmm.
Okay. They think because they don't talk about politics that they just have this natural neutral quality that appeals to both groups.
Right.
And it's never true. It's
Hmm.
never true.
Hmm.
Every business, small or large, projects a set of values that often come from the founder
Hmm.
or the founding group or the location where they are or the partners they work with. Every business projects a set of values that tends to be a little bit more liberal or a little bit more conservative. And it's not a conspiracy, it's just human nature. It's
Yeah.
just what we do as people and human beings. And so, what businesses need to do is recognize this and recognize that what feels natural and normal to them is actually having an effect on their market.
Hmm.
It's like I can think of all the decades I spent looking at creative materials and media plans and advertising strategies and
Hmm.
projecting my own worldview onto decisions made when I did not think through the eyes of the customer and what worldview they had as
Hmm.
liberal or conservative.
Hmm.
And that to me is the 180-degree turn that has to happen. Like we have to stop looking at customers through our eyes at them as if they are objects and look through their eyes at our business and see what they see in order to create better fit. And this is one way to do it.
Wow, what a great response. Thank you. Uh, and do you see this divide narrowing or widening in the near future? Because as a world, from a world without borders, we seem to be getting all our borders all over again. How
Yeah,
should brands respond?
so I think the way to respond is well, first of all, to get to your question, is it widening or not, right? The research shows that people have generally sorted themselves as to
Mhm.
either be a bit more on the liberal side or a bit more on the conservative side. And
Mm,
there's very, very few people left in the middle.
mm,
Okay. And so that is reality. Okay. So then in terms of how brands need to respond,
mm,
they need to look at, well, are my customers more liberal or conservative?
mhm,
Any business I've started talking to does not know the answer to that question. There are
mm.
some guesses and hunches, but it's actually pretty easy to figure
Right.
out just based on where they live.
Mm,
So the way brands should respond is to understand the worldview makeup of their customers, and it's never 50-50, I can tell you. It always skews one way or the other.
Mm.
And then to figure out, okay, does my business align with that group? Like, are the values that we are projecting, does it reinforce the fit between our product and our audience,
Yep.
or not?
Mm.
And should we try some different strategies? And all of this, in a really interesting way, requires marketers to step outside of themselves
Mhm.
and to put their own personal values aside
Right.
and think more like, how do these two groups think? What values do they use to apply to purchase decisions? And then how do you optimize growth for your business? So it
Mm.
becomes a very non-judgmental, dispassionate evaluation of a business situation.
Yeah. Well said. Chris, let's now move to Lifemind, which
Mhm.
is, in your own words, an AI agent platform for marketers. Tell me about Lifemind and what was the inspiration to form this organization?
So the book was the inspiration. I mean, it was, I mentioned something a couple of minutes ago, which was something I wish I'd known decades ago,
Hmm.
which was this perspective of looking through the eyes of the customer at the business. And
Hmm.
that's not something we do.
Hmm.
So as I was studying the values of these two different groups, I came to realize that once again, the world is pluralistic. It's made up of different groups of people.
Hmm.
And the way to deal with it is to simply understand them, learn more about them.
Hmm.
And so you can, and for business purposes, so that you can sell products to them,
Hmm.
in a non-judgmental, way. So with LifeMind, what became clear was that the best way to do this
Hmm.
would be to actually take that stance using AI as a disinterested third party to possibly look at a business and customers, in that manner.
Yeah.
So what we do is we encode in the United States, like all the zip codes in terms of three sets of values. So one set of values is worldview, liberal and conservative, generational values, and then regional values.
Hmm.
Every country is made up of different regions. I mean, and those regions have distinct cultures, just like liberalism and conservatism have different cultures, just like generations express different cultures.
Hmm.
So what we did was we encoded all the 42,000 zip codes in the United States as having these unique sets of values,
Hmm.
so that AI could then take a look at customer data, understand the value makeup of the customers,
Hmm.
and then express those values in creative content in a manner that would be a stronger fit for the customer. So it's like bending your business to fit the world of your customer. And
Hmm.
then along with the targeting and everything else, because the
Hmm.
targeting is actually pretty straightforward. So we use AI in that manner, and it's wonderful because, like, an example would be, I've spent a lot of decades writing and a lot of copywriting, as I've mentioned. And when I see AI take our system and then express a product using values that are very different from mine, I see copy content that I never would have written.
Right.
Okay. I read it and I'm like, I never would have written that. But I totally get why it's written that way.
Hmm.
And it's a fascinating experience because creative teams in advertising and marketing, we're constantly projecting our own personal values onto the work. And this
Hmm.
is about removing that now and
Absolutely.
saying the values that matter are our customers. And
Hmm.
then you have to fit it with the brand as well.
Very well said. And how would you balance automation with human creativity when it comes to marketing through LifeMind?
Well, so the way we talk to companies about that,
Hmm.
and today we're working with just some early customers as we encode the platform, is we say that, the goal of our creative output is to help creative teams recognize a different mental model for selling a product.
Right.
Okay, because that's really what it is. So we automate the output of this content and the targeting, But then it takes the human creative teams and the strategists and the media planners
Mm,
to then do what they need to then layer their intelligence on top of it. But the starting point is
mm,
fundamentally different.
mm,
It's like a dramatically different brief
mm,
that people are given, and it causes you to just think differently,
mm.
and you're thinking more like the customer
Right.
and perhaps less like yourself.
Mm. Amazing. And my next question is, how does LifeMind integrate with other marketing tech stacks like CRMs or other ad platforms?
Yeah, so we intend to fully integrate with CRM platforms. As I mentioned, we're on the home stretch of coding our own platform, and which is, we can now turn around audience segmentation, profiles of segments, how customers think and why they buy, all in the first person and creative content in a day. But we have to finish off the customer facing self-service aspect of it. But once that's done, yeah, we want to fully integrate with especially CRM systems, as you mentioned.
Mm,
We're currently integrated with a system called MRI, which
mm,
is a large research tool used. I think it's mostly in the United States, but
mm,
what we do is we help reveal very specifically the types of media that the
right.
different segments are consumed. So I
Mm,
mentioned all those TV
yeah.
shows are at the top. We're working with a marketing agency right now where they're informing their media planning and media strategies using the integration of our tool with MRI in order
Mm,
to develop rankings of television programs and networks and connected TV outlets in order to align better with what a client's customer
mm.
is watching.
Amazing. And how do you help marketers to localize their messaging while maintaining brand consistency?
So that's a really interesting question because, I think in all the companies I've worked with, there are all these different models for managing your brand,
Mm,
right? I've worked with companies that have highly centralized, highly controlled brand standards where you can't create anything
yeah.
without it looking exactly like this benchmark, right? And
Mm,
then there are other brands that, it's much more loose. There's identity, there's look and feel, there's tone
mm,
and voice,
mm,
but there's more flexibility.
mm,
And I think with our system, what we do
mm,
is we ask customers inherently to look at the world in a more pluralistic way,
mm, mm,
to look at the world as made up of smaller groups of people who think
mm,
differently from you,
mm,
and to enable your brand
mm,
to be flexible.
mm,
Okay. And not every company can do that. Like there's some companies that just won't be able to do that. But there
mm,
are others who are going to be more nimble, more flexible, and maybe they're not the largest companies in the world, and that's fine.
mm,
But what they can do is think about a high level of brand standards that can then be adapted at the local level in a
mm.
way that is meaningful to the local audience. Because
Right.
if you can't be that flexible, then then you really just honestly, the way I think about it is if you can't have that kind of flexibility, it becomes almost like a broadcast model,
Mm.
where we have one way to say something
Yep.
and take it or leave it. And that's just not the way the world works.
Correct. Correct. And there is also the other issue of the question of ethics when you use AI. How do you tackle ethics in your platform?
So we're very careful with how we use AI. We use AI, as I mentioned, as this dispassionate third party to analyze customer insights and reveal content
Mm,
that is aligned with them. So what we do is we constrain the models to mostly looking at our data and
mm,
our research and
mm,
our findings. We have databases of all the values and encoding and all kinds of definitions. So the models are effectively synthesizing
mm,
content that we have. Okay. We
mm,
do now, the only time we let it out to kind of to the the out into the wild is when we need it to learn the business.
right.
So we want our model has to know what
Mm,
products you're selling, how you're selling them, what the competitive advantage is, and so it can interpret which values make the most sense for selling your product to create a stronger fit. So, but otherwise, we tell it constantly not to go out and look for anything except for what we have, and we found that to be very effective, and it delivers very consistent results.
Fascinating. So, Chris, I have time for two more questions for you.
Hmm.
With the rise of deepfakes and other AI generated content, how do you maintain authenticity?
Well, I think the authenticity comes in the AI human interface,
Hmm.
right? So our work is intended to fuel the productivity of teams, not to replace them.
Hmm.
It's to give them a far smarter brief and smarter tools for targeting so that they can do an even better job.
Hmm.
So this is not a product that you just kind of let loose on your
Hmm.
market.
Hmm.
And there are platforms out there that are kind of like that. And,
Yeah.
and the work is all over the map, but that's not our intention.
Hmm.
We want to make people smarter, make better strategic decisions, and just get better results.
Amazing. And my last question, and this is for my viewers and listeners, can you share with us a real world example, without any names, of course, of how LifeMind transformed a marketing strategy?
So we're currently working with two companies right now, and it's kind of interesting because it's coincidental. One is a one is a extremely well-known global mobile application. One is a company that sells fitness products primarily in the United States.
Mm.
And the mobile app has overwhelmingly more liberal customers
Mm.
and in specific regions and a younger audience. Okay.
Mm.
The fitness product is overwhelmingly conservative customers
Mm.
and older audience and different regions within the country.
Mm.
And to look at the two in parallel is fascinating because what comes out of the system and with that integration with MRI that I mentioned, the media plans, the messaging, everything is very different. And yet everyone recognizes in both client organizations that this is aligning far better with their customers. And they get excited about it because they're like, yeah, we kind of intuitively knew some of this stuff, but
Mm.
now we can be far more intentional. And like even the fitness product was fascinating because it's a type of fitness product that focuses on strength as opposed to like an exercise bike, like a Peloton or something like that. And we found in our own research that conservative customers are twice as interested in strength versus fitness,
Mm.
while liberal customers are twice as interested in fitness versus strength.
Wow.
And so these are not small SKUs.
Mm.
These are
Mm.
twice as likely. So
Absolutely.
these are the kinds of things that come out where you can really reinforce the fit between your brand, your product, and the market itself to increase
Mm.
performance.
Amazing. And on that note, Chris, I just want to say this has been such an amazing conversation. I remember 50 years ago doing a business school, I used to read about the four P's of marketing: the product, price, promotion, and positioning. And then, another one was added, which is packaging. And then I started my pharmacy. Another sixth one I added, which was P was for pharmacy. But today is the first time I have actually added another P, which is the party. Uh,
Yeah.
or the color of the party as another piece,
Yes.
which is so critical to branding and marketing. And you gave us some incredible thoughts and incredible ideas, something that my viewers and listeners will, I'm sure, sit back and think, because this is a perspective I had never really thought about. But as you were talking, I was thinking it's no different in India as well. Thank
That's
you for
right.
speaking to me. Go ahead,
Yes,
please.
absolutely. Thank you. Yes, it's a global phenomenon,
Yeah.
and I've enjoyed the conversation very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.